Well, Jeff, don't you like it when people take care of you?
Yes, I do.
You know, your wife comes in and gives you some hot soup or some
Absolutely.
toast.
She treats me better than I deserve.
Yes. Well, that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about taking care of pastors, which is a really good passage.
Oh, that's fantastic. I like this passage.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, he's Chris and I'm Jeff, and we're the Bible guys. All right, man.
Hey, so we're doing dad jokes.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite segments.
Yeah.
I've got some good ones today, by the way.
Yeah, I just read through them like 2 seconds ago. I read
Yeah?
like the first two. They're pretty good.
Okay.
Mine are pretty good.
Yeah? Mine are really good.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Can I go first?
Yo, please.
Okay. 2 antennas got married. The wedding was okay, but the reception was incredible.
Yeah, that's a good
Now,
one.
that was actually really good.
That's a good one.
I like that
That's
one.
Do you know anything about space, the stars and stuff?
Not really.
Okay, do you know Orion's belt?
Yes.
Okay, this says Orion's belt is a big waste of space. I know, terrible joke. 3 stars. Orion's belt is 3 stars.
Yes.
You get it? Okay.
Yes,
yeah.
I do
You
get
kind of
it.
have to work at explaining that one, but I love it.
Yeah, okay, how about this one? My wife has banned me from making any more breakfast puns. She says if I make more, I'm toast. But the kids keep egging me on.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good one. I like that one.
I think it was better when I read it out loud.
Okay. I dropped a tub full of margarine on my foot like a week ago, and it still hurts. I can't believe it's not butter.
Jeez.
Oh,
jeez.
no.
Oh, I can't believe it's not better.
Yeah.
Butter.
Butter.
Okay.
You get
okay.
it?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
See, you got to explain them. The best dad jokes you have to explain.
Yes. So, how about this one? Sad news. My obese parrot died today, but it's a huge weight off my shoulders.
Oh, that's so funny. I went to the doctor after accidentally swallowing food coloring. He said I'll be okay, but I think I died a little inside.
I like that one.
That's a great one.
I really like that one.
That's all about the timing.
That's really
a good one.
That's a good one. Mm-hmm. Okay. This is the one that I glanced at that I didn't love. I got to preface it there.
Okay.
Okay. What do you call friends you like to eat with?
I don't know.
Taste buds.
Okay. Wah, wah.
Yeah, right. That's the one I glanced at real quick. Yep.
When you die, what part of your body dies last? I think it's the pupils. They dilate.
Oh, jeez. Those are 2 womp-womps in a row.
Yeah.
All right, here you go. My wife just confessed that she broke my favorite lamp. I don't think I'll ever be able to look at her in the same light again.
That's a good one. All right, here's a good one. I'm done being a people pleaser. If everyone's okay with that.
If everyone's okay with that. That's really funny.
That's the temptation
Actually,
right
I
there.
really like that last one.
That's a good one.
That's really funny because there's there's depth in that one.
Yep.
That was really good. That's good.
Those are funny, man. Dad jokes are the best.
Well, the funny thing is, I learned to appreciate dad jokes more because my daughter Tori has that type of sense of humor. She just absolutely thinks the silliest, things are so funny. And I never really thought that way. And then I think I just learned to love it. I'll be honest. My favorite part of this segment is watching you laugh.
Yeah, they're funny. Yeah. I love them. So dad jokes are somewhat unique to Latin-based languages specifically, or not Latin-based, but like English-based languages, which we have a lot of Latin in our thing. So the turn of a word, right? So many of our words have multiple meanings. That's why it's funny.
Right.
Right.
Like they're egging me on.
Yeah. Exactly. That's why it's funny, is because we have so many words that have more than one meaning, and then you turn the phrase, and then it surprises your brain. And so they're not particularly funny usually. It's just a surprise, and our brains love a good surprise. So, hey, tomorrow's segment, we're doing mailbags.
Mailbags.
Yeah.
We should have like a thing, like some sort of a jingle. Mailbags.
Yeah. Like on Blue's
happens.
Clues.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Is that where?
That's where it came from. Mm-hmm.
That's where my brain just went.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
So today we are reading from 1 Timothy chapter 5. Yep. So 1 Timothy chapter 5. And he's just kind of doing some housekeeping for the church now. Remember, so he's already established with Timothy, these are the kind of leaders you need in your church. And then now once he's gotten past the kind of leaders we need in the church and the qualifications for them, then he pivots a little bit and starts dealing with some housekeeping of how to treat the people in the church and especially care for those that are in need. So we're just going to read 1 Timothy 5, entire chapter, all the way through the second verse of chapter 6, because it's all the same big idea.
Right.
Yeah. Here we go. He says, never speak harshly to an older man. That's why I treat you with so much respect, Chris.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Because, you're substantially older than me. You just celebrated a birthday.
6 weeks.
You just celebrated a birthday.
2 days ago.
Yeah. So happy birthday to you,
39
man.
again.
Yes, And so never speak harshly to an older man, but appeal to him respectfully as you would to your own father. Talk to younger men as you would to your own brothers. Don't you talk to me like you're the way you talk to your brothers. Treat older women as you would your mother, and treat younger women with all purity as you would your own sisters. Take care of any widow who has no one else to care for her. But if she has children or grandchildren, their first responsibility is to show godliness at home and repay their parents by taking care of them. This is something that pleases God. Now, a true widow, a woman who is truly alone in this world, has placed her hope in God. She prays night and day, asking God for his help. But the widow who lives only for pleasure is spiritually dead even while she lives. Give these instructions to the church so that no one will be open to criticism. But those who won't care for their relatives, especially those in their own household, have denied the true faith. Such people are worse than unbelievers. A widow who is put on the list for support must be a woman who's at least 60 years old and was faithful to her husband. She must be well respected by everyone because of the good she's done. Has she brought up her children well? Has she been kind to strangers and served other believers humbly? Has she helped those who are in trouble? Has she always been ready to do good? The younger widows should not be on the list because their physical desires will overpower their devotion to Christ and they'll want to remarry. Then they would be guilty of breaking their previous pledge. And if they're on the list, they'll learn to be lazy and spend their time gossiping from house to house, meddling in other people's business and talking about things they shouldn't. I wonder why Paul was single. Do you ever, when you read those passages, ever wonder that? So I advise these younger widows to marry again, having children and take care of their own homes. Then the enemy will not be able to say anything against them, for I'm afraid that some of them have already gone astray and now follow Satan. If a woman who is a believer has relatives who are widows, she must take care of them and not put the responsibility on the church. Then the church can care for the widows who are truly alone. Elders who do their work should be respected and paid well, especially those who work hard at both preaching and teaching. For the scriptures say you must not muzzle an ox to keep it from eating as it treads out the grain, and in another place, those who work deserve their pay. Do not listen to an accusation against an elder unless it's confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. Those who sin should be reprimanded in front of the whole church. This will serve as a strong warning to others. I solemnly command you in the presence of God and Christ Jesus and the highest angels to obey these instructions without taking sides or showing favoritism to anyone. Never be in a hurry about appointing a church elder. Do not share in the sins of others. Keep yourself pure. Don't drink only water. You might drink a little wine for the sake of your stomach because you're sick so often. Remember, the sins of some people are obvious, leading them to certain judgment. But there are others whose sins will not be revealed until later. In the same way, the good deeds of some people are obvious, and the good deeds done in secret will someday come to light. All slaves should show full respect for their masters, so they will not bring shame on the name of God and his teaching. If the masters are believers, that is no excuse for being disrespectful. Those slaves should work all the harder because their efforts are helping other believers who are well loved.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Timothy, or Paul, actually writing to Timothy, has a lot of specific housekeeping notes here.
Yeah.
Right. So he's really giving instructions, and
he literally tells Timothy, make sure you drink some wine for your stomach's sake.
Because of the healthy benefit of wine.
And because the water was so polluted.
Yeah.
Right? So it's making him sick all the time.
Yeah. When I was reading in the right here, and in my notes in my Life Application Study Bible, it says, it's unclear why Paul gave this advice to Timothy. Perhaps contaminated water had led to Timothy's problem. Whatever the reason, this statement is not an invitation to overindulge in alcohol. Paul's advice indicates his care for Timothy, not just as his spiritual health as a pastor, but also for his physical health. So yeah, it's a practical thing that Timothy was going through.
Yeah, he was suggesting it for medicinal purposes.
Right, that's correct.
The fact that that's so oddly placed in this chapter.
Right.
So it's very clear we ended the conversation that for the purpose of the reason why Paul wrote this letter. The reason he wrote the letter was to establish leadership in the church Timothy was leading, right? But then he's buttoning things up, and he's just kind of, as Paul does sometimes, he'll have a chapter or two of just really short little ideas. Little idea, little idea, little idea. You know how sometimes he's saying hi at the end? Hey, make sure you say hi to Epaphroditus. Make sure you say hi to Demas. Make sure you say hi to... He kind of does the same thing sometimes in some of his letters where they're just one-liners, all these one-liners. And he's thinking, oh yeah, I forgot that. Oh yeah. It's like he's finished the letter. Yeah. And now he's sitting back going, what else did I need to say? Oh, dude, you're always sick. Quit drinking the water. It's bad for you. Right? Hey, have some. So he's telling him for medicinal purposes, use some wine, maybe help reset his gut and stop drinking so much bad water. So because of that verse, you can kind of see this passage is very specific to that church and Timothy's circumstances, right?
For sure.
And so here he's talking about how to care for the widows. He's talking about how to care for the elders. All those things, and then obviously he mentions the servants working for their master. So,
yeah, and you know, a lot of people they'll take words. For instance, let me talk about this verse right here. I'm just sort of skipping right to it. Right when he says, "Those who sin should be reprimanded in front of the whole church." This will serve as a strong warning to others. Like if you read that verse just by itself,
yeah.
Then you would say, okay, anytime any person in the entire church ever sins, it says right here, we're supposed to bring them up on stage and we're supposed to talk about it.
Let's do it this Sunday.
Let's do it this Sunday.
I got a whole list.
Hey, we would never leave the church.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, not that we're all dirty, rotten sinners.
For one service, and then nobody would ever come back.
Right. For sure. But, you know, it's now, for whatever reason, the culture, it's like you said before, very specific to that group of people, right? Yeah. So he's giving advice.
Well, not so much to that culture, to that specific church.
Yes, that's the culture of that church is what I was trying to say.
Because the scriptures are not affected by culture. Right. But there are times when Paul is writing to a specific context, a specific church.
Yes.
Or in this situation, a specific health issue. With Timothy. So, yeah. Well, now, if you look at that, though, you have to also take it in context because he says he's talking about those that are spiritual leaders. So he says elders who do their work well should be respected and paid well. And then he says, don't listen to an accusation against an elder unless it's confirmed by 2 or 3. And those who sin should be reprimanded in public. Right? So you should, an elder, and I mean, we're not advocating for pay, but he says an elder should be paid, compensated very well for the lifestyle in their community because of their responsibilities. Matter of fact, in Hebrews, it says that we will stand before God double judgment.
That's right.
For our own life and for the life of the church, right? So he says they should be compensated well. And then he says, and you shouldn't just take a single person's accusation, so they should also be protected. There's these two pieces. Yeah. But then he said when that person is found to be guilty of public sin, they should be reprimanded publicly. So that verse is not for everybody.
Right.
That verse is for you and me.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, and so
you have to take the verses in context.
Yeah, and so I the idea that you just said that, you know, elders and pastors and leaders should have double responsibility. You know, they'll be held double accountable. Just recently, as of just like yesterday, I have really felt the weight of responsibility. I was reminded. So a lot of you who are listening online, you may not know we're pastors at Heritage Church.
Yeah.
And Heritage Church is expected to have possibly record-breaking people coming to Easter this year.
Thousands upon thousands
of people. And so just the weight and the responsibility of leading them, you know, because sometimes we can get caught up, I know I can, in the tasks that need to be done. So I'm prepping, you know, a message, or I'm prepping a video, or, you know, we're talking about, you know, lights, or what, you know, seating arrangements, or whatever it is, tickets and things like this. And in a conversation yesterday, I was just reminded of the responsibility and the weight. And I got to tell you, it really hit me hard, and I take it really seriously.
Yeah.
And so I'm extremely thankful for that conversation. And
Well, eternity weighs in the balance.
Yeah.
With the words we're going to say.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've done all this work, and you and your team especially have done a fabulous job constructing this service. We have very limited parking. So we have very tight times between our services, and our building can't handle the thousands and thousands of people that are coming in. So we have to have many identical services. And so we have to have very tight services, which means we have to plan down to the minute, right?
Yeah.
And so when you have to plan to the minute, we have to invite the Holy Spirit to plan with us, and which I think is important. And your team's done a great job on that. But still, you're thinking through every transition. You're thinking every word, right? There are moments in our Easter service coming up that if we miss the wording on that moment, we miss the entire next segment. Right. And that's important because we know that there are going to be thousands of people who have not responded to the gospel of Christ. They're going to be getting it maybe for the first time. Ever. And so that carries a lot of weight, right? I'll be honest with you, even on a normal weekend, I sleep every night of the week, 6 nights a week. I sleep like a baby. I put my head on the pillow and I'm asleep in 5 minutes. I'm not joking. But on Saturday night, before coming in on Sunday, I can't hardly sleep. Partly it's excitement, and a lot of it is just the weight of that weekend, knowing what's coming, knowing our responsibility. And then the same thing happens sometimes when I know that we're coming into a heavy counseling time or something like that. Just the weight of that ministry is heavy. So that's part of his challenge there.
And by the way, by the time this airs, Easter will have been over.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
For our listeners.
Yeah. So they'll be looking back at what we did.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll like it rather than...
Yeah, and they'll say, oh, yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, that was good. So I think your team did a great job.
It was one of the most amazing things ever.
It was a good one.
We were falling down and weeping.
So he's talking here about the importance of at the very beginning, of honoring people. And I think that this is incredibly important. I think it's important for us to teach our children to, regardless of what you think of the man, you honor an older man like you'd honor your father, right? You respect an older woman like you respect your mother or your grandmother. Because of their position, because of the fact they've lived life longer. You just don't know what they know, right? And then you treat the men, the younger men and the younger women in the church, you treat them like brothers and sisters. And the importance of treating the people in our church like family members, not like corporate people or mutual participants. And I think a lot of times that's the way we think about it, is this is my church and you're also participating at my church.
Right.
And that is not the attitude. We're supposed to have an attitude like it's family, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers.
Yes. And so my note here says, Paul encourages Timothy, a pastor, to treat the people in his congregation as members of his family. People in ministry positions can avoid improper attitudes toward those they minister by treating them as family members. If pastors see people they shepherd as fellow members in God's family, they will protect them and help them grow spiritually.
Right.
So the perspective, if it's that, you feel responsibility over them. Like if I'm in a crowd and something happens, I'm gonna grab my child and pull them close, right?
Right.
To protect them. And what Paul is saying here is he's saying feel responsibility over everybody who's a member of your church because they're all family.
And then, and I made a joke about Paul. I wonder why he's single. He makes some very specific comments about caring for widows. Here, the older widows and the younger widows in the church. And he's really driving home the idea that family should take care of family. If a man and women that have the ability to make money and build resources, if they're not caring for their family, he says, then man alive, you're not living up to what you should be, right? And he has some really strong words about that. But then for those women who had no help, then you're supposed to care for them because there was no social safety net, right? So then the church would take care of them. And these widows then would kind of sign up almost like, this is where the idea of nuns came from 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and here in this passage, a couple other places, where women would say, I'm never going to remarry. I'm just going to give my life to the service of the church. And then in exchange for giving her life to the service of the church, then the church would fund her and take care of her, that kind of thing. That's kind of where the idea came from, the very early time. So he puts a restriction here, if they're over 60, they can do that. If they're under 60, again, I believe that's a very specific contextual thing for Timothy's church. because there's nowhere else in the Bible that gives any other restrictions for this. He just talks about older and younger, but in this situation, it's 60. Well, it might be because they had so many widows there. They could have had some kind of disease outbreak or a war, something. There's a bunch of widows. And so he's kind of giving some guidelines, but then he goes, don't support the women that are spreading gossip or causing trouble in the church and that kind of thing. It's the language he uses, a pretty strong language here. And that's why I was kind of making fun of why is he single. It's the way he communicates. You could say the same thing without being kind of so harsh, right? But that's what he does.
And he lays it out.
Yeah.
And of course, the part that we referenced at the very beginning about elders who do their work well should be respected and paid well.
Yeah.
And then he quotes in another place, those who work deserve their pay. Mm-hmm. He's actually quoting Deuteronomy 25. And then also Jesus quoted Deuteronomy 25 in Luke 10.
Yeah.
So Moses says it.
Yeah.
Jesus quotes it. And then Paul quotes Jesus, who quoted Moses.
Right.
It's like a game of telephone.
Well, this is one of the elements
Only it's accurate.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the elements of determining, quite honestly, what's scripture versus what's a good writing. And when Jesus quotes passages in the Old Testament, he quotes from most of the Old Testament books, then we go, okay, Jesus believed those books to have authority, right? He saw those as God's words. Then when Paul is quoting Jesus, quoting the Old Testament, it goes, okay, now we've got Paul recognizing Jesus' biblical authority on it. And so there's the Bible's its own best commentary, is what I'm trying to say there. And the Bible will prove itself, and that's what happens in this passage.
Yeah, and so I like that fact that it's talking about taking care of your pastors. When I was in the South, by the way, this is not an advocate of any of our listeners to reach out and appreciate us. But when I was in the South, there was a Pastor Appreciation Month in October. And I don't know why, but for some reason in the Bible Belt in Atlanta, it was always like this huge celebration in October. And we come up here and it's like October comes and goes and it's like, it's kind of like Sweetest Day. I've never celebrated Sweetest Day in my life. It's like Happy Sweetest Day. I'm like, what are you talking about? Today's Sweetest Day?
Your wife knows. Your wife knows that you've never celebrated it.
Well, we don't celebrate it for each other. But anyway, I do appreciate the fact that that's in there, and hopefully that's exactly what
and then
our church
I think,
does for us.
we wrapped up. We went into chapter 6 just a little bit to talk about slaves and their masters. I would just say, we've already commented a lot about slavery and how the Bible doesn't endorse it, just recognizes that was part of their culture. But I do think that as people who have jobs and we have bosses, there are principles we can pull out to say, okay, you know what? I'm not just serving my boss. I'm serving God. So, instead of being repulsed by this idea, let's just swap it out with workers and bosses, right? That employees and bosses. And then in that situation, what we should always be doing is we don't want to bring shame on the name of God. We don't want to bring shame on him and his word, on Jesus. We want to represent him well in front of our bosses because lost people are watching. Yeah. And so, as you go about your day to day, as you go into the office tomorrow, be thinking about the fact that, you work not just for your own paycheck. Now that you have Jesus in your life, you represent Jesus all the time. You're wearing his name on your jersey all the time. And everybody knows. And so don't bring shame to Christ by your lifestyle at work.
That's great.
That's really what he's talking about there.
Well, that's a great place to end. So we will see you next time on the Bible Guys.